Hello and welcome to Read Becca. We're wrapping up the Translateathon and I just wanted to check in with all that I've read. It's been a really great experience as always. I think this is maybe my third time participating in Translateathon and I think it went really well. So I actually finished 3 things: a short story collection, a novel, and a manga. And all of those were translated works. I also got 2 things in progress. I think that was really good for a 2-week readathon. So we'll start with the stuff I have. Some of the stuff had to go back already. So first up, we have Autobiography of a Corpse by Sigizmund Krzhizhanovsky, and this is translated by Joanne Turnbull. So this is a short story collection, and it has a number of longer stories that are like novelette length. I think 4 of them or 5 of them are that length. So Autobiography of a Corpse, In the Pupil, Seams, The Collector of Cracks, and Postmark Moscow. So 5 stories were in the longer range. And then the very short stories, The Land of Knots, Runaway Fingers, The Unbitten Elbow, Yellow Coal, Bridge Over the Styx, and 30 Pieces of Silver, I enjoyed quite a bit. The long ones I didn't like as much because they got very philosophical and very rambly and didn't seem to have as much of a point, where the short stories were very distilled down to what they had to say. I think Kant is mentioned several times over the course of the stories, and I'm just not super familiar with philosophers and philosophy. I've never studied philosophy, so yeah, it was possibly a little over my head. But the short ones, so The Land of Knots was a little abstract for me. It almost becomes an alt biblical mythology where it talks about the Ises and the knots were, they ate from the tree of knowledge but not the tree of life, and that spawned an alternate Cain, I guess. Yeah, so that one was okay. The Runaway Fingers are a pianist's fingers one day decide that they are tired of being limited to the keys and flee, taking the right hand with them. That one was very creative and interesting. I really liked it. The Unbitten Elbow was so strange. This man is determined to take on the pursuit of futility and bite his own elbow. And he becomes a sideshow freak at a circus because the circus master convinces him, well, you're trying to do this anyway, why not get paid for it, right? And so it leads to this entire mythos around him and almost a religious movement where there are people who believe that he may, or they believe he may not, be able to actually realistically bite his elbow. So it was very strange and very bizarre and a little bit dark in the end. So Yellow Coal was probably my favorite, tied with 30 Pieces of Silver. And Yellow Coal is all about this group, an alt energy group, who put out the call for anyone's ideas about a renewable or sustainable source of energy that they can replace the current means of energy. And Yellow Coal is in fact someone's premise that spite, human spite, can be used to fuel everything. And let me just read one passage from this one because it's amazing this was written so long ago and yet so very prescient. And I think these all have dates for when they were written. So this was in 1939. Meanwhile, the capitalists, hand in glove with Canoe is the group that we're trying to find alternate energy. Meanwhile, the capitalists, hand in glove with Canoe, abandoned the old policy of appeasing workers who bore grievances against the exploiter class. Now that hatred of exploitation could be exploited for industrial purposes, collected by an absorberator and pumped into engines and machines. Mills could get by with the workers' hatred alone. The workers themselves were no longer needed. Factories and mills began laying huge numbers of people off, keeping only skeleton crews to man the spite collectors. The wave of protests and strikes that swept the globe only swelled the bilious energy in accumulators and gave good dividends. It turned out that the very purest spite, it hardly needed to be filtered, was produced by the unemployed. At the first conference on spite collection, a respected German economist declared that a bright new day was dawning when work could be done with the help of strikes. A guarded swash of gloating applause greeted his words. The glass tubes on the absorberators in the conference hall trembled slightly. So, it was very anti-capitalist, anti-corporatist, and really satirical, I would say, very much. Then, the next short one was Bridge Over the Styx, and this one, I'm not sure I got the point of it, but it was really entertaining. It was all about a man who's going to bed, and a toad shows up on his bedside table who has gotten lost on its way to cross the river Styx. So very strange, and he has a conversation with this toad. And then 30 Pieces of Silver, I think, is the one I've talked about a couple of times before. It's probably the shortest in here. It's only a couple pages, and it recounts the story of the 30 pieces of silver that Judas received for betraying Christ, and kind of follows the people that they went through after that kind of were cursed. So overall, I really liked it. It was, as is usual with a short story collection, a bit of a mixed bag. Some things that I really enjoyed and some I didn't. So next up, I read a manga, Komi Can't Communicate, Volume 2 by Tomohito Oda. And this one was okay. It was another very mixed bag. The first one kind of had a single story arc, and this manga setup in the first volume is that Komi, who can't communicate, has a disorder, a communication disorder or an anxiety disorder, where she... Thanks, Cinnamon. And the arc of the first one is the setup that Komi has a communication or anxiety disorder, and so she just freezes up and can't talk. But she's starting at a new school, and so one boy there, Tadano, understands that this is what's going on, and he determines he's going to help her find 100 friends. And so that's really the plot of this. So in Volume 2, which I read this time around, what is actually happening is we see kind of individual issues of meeting individual new people. And so the first person that is met is obsessed with beating Komi because she's kind of the goddess of the classroom, right? Everybody is jealous of her and thinks she's just kind of frigid because she doesn't talk to anybody. But she gets over her jealousy and realizes that she is has a crush on Komi. But to get through that, the jealous competition at the beginning is all about a physical, and I really didn't like those elements because she's getting very upset about things like her height. She's not as tall as Komi, and so she's getting marked down during the physical for not being as tall as Komi. Stuff like that, and it just, I didn't like it. It just did not work for me. So that one was a low point. The higher points were this kind of slice of lifey issues. And there were one where they went out to a ramen shop. There was another one where they went clothes shopping with Komi. And so we see a couple of those things, and then the rest was meeting other different people. So it was sweet. It was a 3-star for me. Nothing really special, and kind of a mixed bag. Third, I read Story of a Goat by Perumal Murugan and translated by Kalyan Raman, if I can remember that right. I hope that's right. I'll put it all below, as always. So I've talked about this one at length already, I think, in my previous updates, but I really enjoyed this. I think I lacked the context for what commentary it was having about the Indian government, and this one was from Tamil Nadu, India. And so it's all following this goat, Punachi, who comes to be taken care of by an elderly couple in a kind of strange way. There's a giant man who shows up one day with this newborn, day-old goat, trying to get rid of it, but it's apparently too good to sell at market. And so this old couple take it in, and they acknowledge the strange circumstances that they're going through, but they love it like their daughter, basically. And so over the course of this novel, we see a lot of commentary about the treatment of women, and this elderly couple view her at different points as both this major blessing who is extremely special, but then as a curse, and she's abused and mistreated. So we see them force her to be a certain way from a body perspective in order to meet requirements from either the government or expectations externally. We see them pair her up with another goat for mating purposes. So she kind of goes through this life cycle of the big events in a woman's life. And all throughout, she kind of doesn't have her own identity. She, at one point, does want to have a relationship with one of the goats and thinks she's in love, but she isn't really allowed to have that relationship herself. And so I think it has very interesting commentary from that perspective. I know there is meant to be some additional to that, like I said, about the Indian government. So I wish there had been a lot more translator's notes to this one. That would have really been helpful. But overall, it was an enjoyable reading experience, and I do think it was well translated just purely as a plot narrative. So that was a 4-star out of 5. So then let's talk about stuff we've got in progress. So this one, I had too high of hopes, I think, about getting into this. Shadow of the Wind by Ruiz Zafón. And this was a priority because it's on my physical TBR. It counts for Latinx author for our fantasy bingo card. I only got about 75 pages in, which is quite a bit better than nothing, right? So not as much as I was hoping. I hoped to get a big chunk of that one done, and I didn't. But I've picked it up off of my physical TBR. It's been on my TBR for years, so I'm at least progressing through. So I'm quite happy with that. And I think so far, it's beautifully written. It's a story that is a book about books. It's very whimsical, yet kind of dark, and it's almost gothic because it has that kind of darkly romantic feel. And I think the one thing to note is that so far all of the main characters, like all the primary characters, are really unlikable. So if you need likable characters, this may not gel with you. They're all kind of not great people. So I'm looking forward to getting more into this one since I own it. It's been taking a little bit of a backseat to all of my millions of library books right now. So I did get into one of the many library books I picked up that were translated works as well. And that book was Qualityland by Marc-Uwe Kling. And I just started it last night and got about 50 pages in. So I made a little progress, and it's not super long. It's moving pretty quick. This is very weird, and I really like it. It's comedic sci-fi, I would say, like a corporate dystopia. So you can see like where I was really enjoying Yellow Coal. This has a lot of those similar elements, but it's another satire. It reminds me a lot of maybe Grady Hendrix, who has these just super packaged works, because this is very packaged. Like, it's got version notes at the beginning and stuff like that, with Christopher Moore, who writes really satirical, comedic work. So I think those two authors are maybe kind of a mashup of what this is. So I think I will be very shocked if I don't really end up enjoying this. It will probably be, if it continues on, one of my favorites of the year. So that is all the translated work I worked on. I'm really happy with that, considering we had 2 weeks to read. So I got done a ton. I read other stuff during this, so it was a really great reading week. Did you participate in Translateathon? And what was your favorite thing you read? Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see more.